is the world today. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Here are your top stories. COVID clouds Christmas celebrations for a second year running as cases surge to records in parts of the world. The crew on board the China space station get ready for their second spacewalk. And Russia says its troops have finished military drills near the Ukrainian border. We begin our program with the latest on the coronavirus pandemic across the world. Surging COVID cases are overshadowing Christmas celebrations in many parts of the world. In France, infections hit six figures for the first time on Christmas Day. More than 104,000 cases were reported, the third consecutive daily record. And the government will discuss new measures on Monday. In neighboring Britain, booster vaccine shots are offered through Christmas. More than 122,000 cases were detected on Christmas Eve. Daily cases topped 100,000 for the first time during the week. In Australia, the most populous state of New South Wales reported a record nearly 6,400 infections, along with a spike in hospitalizations. Officials say the surge is driven by Omicron. And in South Africa, total infections have topped 3.4 million, but daily cases are falling. The country is the hardest hit in Africa, accounting for a third of the continent's caseload. And in South Africa, total infections have topped 3.4 million, but daily cases are falling. All right, let's now go to the United States, where many have been stranded at Christmas amid mass flight cancellations. Nearly 1,000 flights were cancelled on Saturday, the second straight day of mass disruptions. The virus has hit many pilots and crew members, preventing them from working. The country has reported more than 170,000 new cases, mostly driven by the Omicron variant. Owen Fairclough has more.
Well, we're going to miss our family, but it's what we need to do to keep our family safe. We hope you'll consider limiting travel and the size of family gatherings as well this year.
Merry Christmas!
President Joe Biden's 2020 Christmas message. And 12 months on, there's a growing sense of déjà vu. The latest COVID-19 variant, Omicron, is everywhere, and more countries are either in lockdown or imposing travel restrictions. But now, the US has imposed only the latter upon 8 southern African countries where Omicron was first detected. But even if the US economy is growing, with unemployment not far off pre-pandemic lows, life is far from back to normal. Access to many public places is increasingly contingent upon proof of vaccination. That's if they're open.
We're in the heart of Washington, D.C.'s downtown. Now, before the pandemic, office and retail vacancies were on the rise, but they've effectively doubled during COVID-19. This block was almost entirely populated by restaurants, but nearly all of them have gone. And this area would have been teeming with people at lunchtime. And as you can see, there are a fraction of the numbers.
It looks like some businesses here are attempting a revival, but nearby, 2 fashion brands, Anthropologie and Gap, are gone for good as they permanently close hundreds of stores across the US and Europe. And the lives of many who still frequent downtown are also different now.
It's like stay at home and come to work, and not everybody is at work together. Things have changed in the mass.
It's been careful, more careful than it was.
I'm just working and doing everything, so everything's good.
But as Washington, D.C. joins populous states, including California and New York, in reimposing mask mandates, there's concern about just how much 2022 will look and feel like the previous 2 years. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Over 1.2 billion Chinese people have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. The country is now fighting a growing outbreak in the northwestern city of Xi'an. The Chinese mainland reported 158 new cases on Saturday. Most are in the capital of Shanxi province, home of the Terracotta Army. Guangxi in South China reported 1 local case. 48 new imported cases were also detected. Zhou Qiangwen brings us more from Xi'an.
This Saturday, Xi'an started a new round of nucleic acid testing. Residents of different units take nucleic acid tests at different times, which avoids crowd gathering and improves nucleic acid sampling efficiency. Xi'an has 1 high-risk area and 150 medium-risk regions. The rest of the place remains low risk. People who live in low-risk place could go out once every 2 days. And there are medical staff and workers specialized in transporting supplies to residents living in high or medium-risk regions. The electric and gas for people living are guaranteed already. Residents can also go online for medical treatment, study, work, and fitness, which ensures people's life in Xi'an.
Let's now turn to India. At least 6 workers have been killed after a boiler exploded in a noodle-making factory in Bihar state. More than a dozen have also been injured. Rescue operations are underway and the death toll is expected to rise. We'll bring you the latest updates as soon as we receive them. The crew on board the China space station are preparing for their second spacewalk. They're expected to carry out the operation later today. The 3-member crew includes Wang Aping, China's first female astronaut to conduct a spacewalk. While the Shenzhou 13 crew conducted their first spacewalk last month, Gao Yiming looks back at the mission.
神舟13号关闭双向承压舱门。
The first extravehicular mission by Shenzhou 13. It all began with Commander Zhai Zhigang opening the door.
打开出舱舱门前，状态确认正常，按正常计划打开出舱舱门。
我是动幺，我已出舱，感觉良好。
曙光明白。
Zhai was the very first Chinese astronaut to conduct a spacewalk 13 years ago on the Shenzhou 7 mission. This time, he witnessed another first by a woman.
我一会儿出舱，感觉良好。
曙光明白。
The 41-year-old Wang Yaping became the first Chinese woman to conduct an extravehicular activity. Their teammate Ye Guangfu stayed inside the capsule to support the duo's work. During more than 6 hours, the crew completed a series of tasks, including installing gadgets for the robotic arms and the work platform. The mission also further tested the functions of China's homegrown new generation extravehicular spacesuits, which can support EVAs for 8 hours.
我来接你们俩了。
The trio are expected to stay in space for a record 6 months, doing their part to help complete China's Tiangong space station by the end of 2022. Gao Yiming, CGTN.
At least 16 people have died when their boat sank off the Greek island of Paros in the Central Aegean Sea. The Greek Coast Guard said 80 people were believed to be aboard the vessel. 63 were rescued. The boat was heading to Italy from Turkey. Authorities blame trafficking gangs for the disaster. It is the 3rd shipwreck involving migrants this week. Earlier on Friday, 11 people died after another ship carrying migrants sank off near an island in southern Greece. And another boat overturned overnight between Tuesday and Wednesday, with dozens feared missing. Greece is one of the main routes into the European Union for migrants from Africa, the Middle East and beyond. Russia says its troops near the Ukrainian border have completed their month-long drills and are returning to their permanent bases. The deployment had fueled fears in Kiev and western capitals that Moscow was plotting an attack on its neighbor. Russia denied such plans but said it needed certain pledges from the West, including a NATO promise not to expand the alliance eastward towards Russia. Moscow says it feels its own security is being threatened by Ukraine's growing ties with the Western allies. The Kremlin has agreed to meet with the US and Germany to discuss the situation in January. Well, this week marks 30 years since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Since then, many former members have taken radically different paths, but none have been living more in the shadow of the USSR than one of its founding members, Russia. Julia Chapman in Moscow looks at the differences between Russia then and how it is today.
It's been 3 decades since Russians walked the streets of the Soviet Union. The foundations of Moscow remain the same, but society here has changed enormously. The collapse of the USSR swept away communism and ushered in capitalism. Gone were the days of exit visas and bread lines. Life in the Soviet system could be incredibly challenging, but many Russians look back on that era with fondness.
I remember the Soviet Union very well and with warmth. We lived in it and we felt like we were people. We had to work, work, work. Now some people work, others are just lazy.
It seems to me that there was more order then. People were kinder to each other. Nowadays, money ruins people.
Those positive feelings aren't limited to the older generations. While younger Russians may not remember the Soviet era, many can recall difficult childhoods after its disintegration.
When we talk about the Soviet period, above all, the top-rated association that people have is stability, confidence in the future, calmness. The rhetoric, which in the Soviet period, especially the Brezhnev era, was called stagnation, has been replaced with a desire for confidence and stability, certainty amid uncertainty. Of course, this is a revision of what happened in that period.
Across the other former Soviet republics, views on the Union vary dramatically. While some have taken a more pro-Western approach since then, others have remained firmly in Russia's orbit.
President Vladimir Putin famously once called the collapse of the USSR the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. For him and many other Soviet citizens, the loss of the empire was felt very personally, and that perspective has shaped Russian foreign policy for the past 30 years.
In many ways, a Cold War mentality continues to persist. Russia and the West are still adversaries, and Moscow still views the world through spheres of influence. As such, it firmly objects to NATO expansion, seeing it as a threat to its interests.
Of course, the current generation of political leaders in this country compare Russia to the Soviet Union. There is, I think, psychologically quite understandable intention to compare Russia today with the Soviet Union during the Cold War, but in many ways this comparison is misleading because Russia is not the Soviet Union. It's a different country. It has different capabilities. It is not an ideological alternative to liberal democracy, at least at this juncture.
Today's Russia is an open, vibrant society, but many hallmarks of the Soviet Union remain. Controls on the media, the economy, and civil society are still tight. Even after 30 years, it's difficult to escape the past. Julia Chapman, CGTN, Moscow.
That is it on this edition of The World Today. Coming up next is Africa Live. Stay with us.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
suicide bomber kills at least 6 people at a restaurant in eastern DR Congo. South African anti-apartheid campaigner Archbishop Desmond Tutu dies aged 90. And a 2-day mourning period has been declared in Burkina Faso after 41 people were killed in an ambush. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program, Tunisia's Tunisia acquires 5 new aircraft at a cost of $261 million. And Mali denies deployment of Russian mercenaries in the country, insisting only military trainers are present. A suicide bomber has killed at least 6 people in the Democratic Republic of Congo, according to local officials. So far, 15 people have been wounded in the blast. The explosion on Saturday took place at a crowded night spot in the eastern city of Beni. Local officials speaking to AFP said 2 children were among the dead. Authorities are blaming the ADF for the attack. Beni is located in North Kivu province, where the group has been accused of launching multiple attacks. Both the DRC and Uganda have launched a joint operation against the ADF.
When I went inside, I saw movement. A motorcycle turned around. When the motorcycle turned around, I heard a bang. I shouted, "Manager, manager." He replied, "I don't see you." I lost control. I didn't know what was going on outside. When we left the restaurant, that's when I learned that there had been people killed. I saw those alive and wounded being taken to the hospital.
Well, let's cross over to CGTN's Michael Beleke. He's joining us from Kampala. Michael, what is the latest on that suicide bomb attack on the night spot in Beni?
Hi there. Well, I'll also first tell you that Beni is a town which is also near the Ugandan border, just in the east of the DR Congo. And such attacks have been happening previously. And yesterday, we understand there's a claim that the suicide bomber blew himself up at an entrance of this restaurant when the security denied him entry into this restaurant, where several people were actually parting away. We understand 6 people died and many more got injured. We also understand the restaurant, what we know is the restaurant had more than 30 people. There were quite a number of people who were here celebrating Christmas on Saturday night. And while no one has claimed responsibility for the attack yet, officials in Beni are blaming the suicide explosion on the ADF rebel group. The ADF rebel group is a Ugandan militia group operating in the eastern DR Congo. And it's also believed to have links to the terrorist group ISIS. And Beni has, like I said before, that experienced several attacks. I think the last attack was in June, but it didn't kill anyone. But we know that the town has also been a site for clashes between the DRC army and the ADF rebel group. This attack on Beni, of course, comes a month after the ADF carried out similar attacks on Uganda, which claimed about 6 people. A move that has definitely forced the Ugandan military to enter the DRC to have a joint campaign against the ADF. With the DRC military. So
let's talk about that joint military incursion into the DRC by Ugandan military. How are the joint military operations by Uganda and the DRC troops to tackle ADF fighters in Congo's eastern region? How are they progressing?
Well, this joint campaign started about 3 weeks ago. That was on November 30th. And the Congolese authorities gave Uganda a green light to enter the DR Congo and attack ADF rebel positions, of course with the help of their military. And following the ground and air attacks that have happened in recent weeks, we understand several ADF positions and camps have been overrun. We understand some suspects have actually surrendered to this campaign, to the joint campaign, but many more have also been killed in the battle. according to the UPDF, the ADF groups have fled some of these camps and they are dispersed within the region. The UPDF, that's the Ugandan military, says that this joint campaign has helped restore some kind of calm in this volatile eastern region of the DR Congo. And the operations are still going on, they are ongoing with, of course, ground troops combing and destroying these rebel bases. By the way, not just for the ADF, but also other militia groups are being eliminated from this place, yes.
All right, Michael Beleke joining us there from Kampala, thank you. Archbishop Desmond Tutu has died at the age of 90. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer in the late 1990s. In the recent years, he was hospitalized several times to treat infections associated with his cancer treatment. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa called Tutu a patriot without equal. A Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Tutu was a veteran of the country's struggle against white minority rule.
It is with great sadness that I have to announce that our dearly beloved Archbishop Emeritus of Cape Town and the 1984 Nobel Peace Laureate Desmond Mpilo Tutu died a short while ago at the age of 90.
Well, CGTN's Renee Delcam is live for us in Cape Town for more on this developing story. Renee, sad news there coming out of South Africa this morning. What has been the reaction of leaders and people regarding the death of Archbishop Desmond Tutu?
Yes, sad indeed, Beatrice. As can be expected, there has been an outpouring of grief and tribute being paid to Archbishop Desmond Tutu. South Africa is in mourning for the loss of one of its greatest sons, Desmond Mpilo Tutu, who died, as you said, at the age of 90 in Cape Town on the 26th of December, which is the day of goodwill in South Africa. Over the years, Archbishop Tutu has become a symbol of peace, hope, and justice across the globe. In South Africa, he was known as one of the greatest freedom fighters. He was an iconic leader in the anti-apartheid struggle, an iconic religious leader, as well as human rights campaigner for causes across the globe. We know that President Ramaphosa, as you said, paid tribute to him as a great patriot of South Africa. The president said that he was a leader of great principle and pragmatism. The Archbishop in Cape Town paid tribute to his great courage and his moral leadership over the years. Now, President Nelson Mandela was always known as the champion of the people, and Archbishop Tutu too was known as a person for and of the people. During the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, he was the chairperson, often listening to human rights atrocities which were perpetrated against apartheid activists and their families. And the Archbishop often cried when he felt the pain of the people. While millions across the world mourn him, people of South Africa mourning him right now, he always said that he would like to be remembered by the epitaph that he chose for himself as a man who had laughed, cried, and loved.
All right, Renee Delcam joining us there with that development from Cape Town. Thank you. Well, let's take a closer look at the life of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Well, Kista Nyabo has more.
Desmond Mpilo Tutu was born in October 1931 and ordained an Anglican priest in 1961. He was thrust into the limelight in 1978 when he was appointed Secretary General of the South African Council of Churches. A small figure with a sense of humor who radiated genuine warmth, Tutu often used his sharp wit to make serious points. Throughout the 1980s, Tutu forced the West to focus on the suffering of South Africa's black majority under white rule, urging sanctions against a government clinging to power.
We raise our hands and we say, we will be free! All of us! Black and white together! For we are marching to freedom!
Tutu was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1984 for his non-violent campaign to win racial equality for his people. He used this as a shield to work beyond the grasp of the white minority government. When black nationalist leader Nelson Mandela was released from his 27-year imprisonment in 1990, he stayed with his longtime friend Tutu on his first night of freedom and gave his first news conference from the grounds of Tutu's official residence. 4 years later, an ecstatic Tutu was able to vote for the first time in South Africa's historic all-race elections. Hopes of a quiet retirement faded when President Mandela asked Tutu to head the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The commission was charged with the delicate task of probing political crimes committed during the apartheid era. Tutu was visibly affected by the harrowing testimonies of inhumanity, torture and murder. In spite of failing health and undergoing treatment for potentially terminal cancer, Tutu continued in his role as the nation's moral guardian. He regularly criticized the ruling African National Congress and was not averse to attacking Mandela's successors Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma. Tutu, who retired from most public duties in October 2010, was still seen as a voice of integrity. The Arch, as he was affectionately known, will be remembered as one of the leading lights of the struggle against apartheid, who was not afraid to condemn injustice wherever he saw it. Wilkesanyabo, CGTN.
In Sudan, security forces fired tear gas to disperse protesters. Thousands of Sudanese protesters rallied on Saturday, 2 months after a military takeover, to demand a return to civilian rule. The demonstrators converged on the presidential palace in Khartoum, which is currently serving as the headquarters of the military government since they seized power in October. Officers had earlier blocked bridges connecting the capital to suburbs, cut phone lines and restricted the internet ahead of the planned protests. The United Nations Special Envoy to Sudan, Volker Perthes, has urged the authorities to protect the protests, not to stop them. Protesters maintain they will not negotiate with the military.
What happened on October 25th is a fateful coup. The coup continues to this day. One cannot say otherwise. We will not stop demonstrating until we have a proper civilian government. And this time, the people will take part in this government. The people will not just be on the streets to serve the interest of politicians or the elite. No. This time, protesters are out on the streets to say that they are the ones who decide.
We don't only want to bring down the soldiers, we want to have the Sudan we wish to see, a Sudan that resembles us, that responds to our demands and gives rights to all in an equitable way.
And I'm now joined by CGTN's Musa Mohsin Ibrahim in Khartoum and Nabil Negum Eden, who is an independent researcher and author of international politics based in Cairo, for more on this development. Musa, if I may start off with you, what is the latest from the aftermath of the protests yesterday?
Yes, we know after what's happened on the 25th of October, when the general commander was making this kind of procedure, was being called a coup. So all the Sudanese, all the people, they gathered together and working so hard. They was refusing. So all people are rejecting what's happening on. So we can say couples, 2 months is all the protesters they want in the streets, asking for the rights and democracy, and they fighting for having a civil government. Yesterday, there was no internet and there was no telecommunications, so the people went in the street from many for direction in Khartoum, and all of them they asking and demand for the civil government. As there is no internet and there is no connection, it was hard for us to receive all information one by one. So this morning we will discover that there is 178 get injured and 1 passed away, and there is 2 and patients are unstable, they're healthy. This is the last update. But life now, it's normal, everything is good, but there is no any declarations, there is no any press conference. We're waiting from the General Commander and the Prime Minister for say something about this is what's happening.
Well, Nabil, there seems to be increasing pressure by the protesters in Sudan. How do you think the authorities are going to handle the situation?
Thanks for having me. In fact, the situation in Sudan is so critical that the state and the revolution, both of them could slip into a very deep valley. I think the way out of what's going on in Sudan is compromise. The military generals have got to listen to the voice of the people in the streets, people who managed to get to the doors of the presidential palace twice. Compromise is the name of the way out of this situation in Sudan.
Well, Musab, compromise is the way out, but what are the organizers of the protests planning next?
Yes, organizer for the planning for the protest and demonstration, all of them, they're being unpleasant about what's going on. So the streets are full with the protesters. So they're planning and they promise from the beginning of this month, they said like there's going to be 5 protests. And there is another one after 4 days. So they prepare for it right now and they announced it this morning. They say 19th of December, there's going to be a big millionaire for all people from all over Sudan and many different states are going, all the people in Khartoum, they're going to march into the presidential place asking for the rights and democracy. They prepare for right now for all over the Sudan. They're planning now. They're planning for another one after 4 days from now.
All right. Nabil, a final comment from you. What does the silence of the international community and regional blocs mean for Sudan and the protesters?
That silence is going to have a very dangerous and serious repercussions. Sudan is not a small country. Sudan is a country of 45 million population, and Sudan is quite a rich country when it comes to natural resources. But when it comes to the outcome of that country, it is considered, according to the UN reports, one of the poorest. Next year, you're going to have 14 million Sudanese citizens needs humanitarian support. So the silence of the international community is not good, not only for Sudan, but for that part of northeastern Africa. So power centers in Washington, Moscow, Beijing, Brussels, London, and Paris, they should pull up their socks and go with a financial, economical, and political package to save Sudan into falling to be a failure state.
All right, Musab Mohsin Ibrahim in Khartoum and Nabil Negum Edin in Cairo, to you both, thank you. Now turning to Somalia, clashes between rival factions of the security forces has forced thousands to flee. The fighting took place in Bosaso town, located in the semi-autonomous state of Puntland. The UN's humanitarian agency, OCHA, said it was extremely concerned about the escalation in violence. OCHA's country representative estimated 40% of the IDPs had already been displaced by a previous unrest. And staying with security matters, Burkina Faso's president has declared a 2-day period of mourning after suspected militants killed members of a government-backed civilian militia. The 41 were ambushed on Thursday as they swept a remote area in the northern Norum province. They were part of civilian fighters from the Homeland Defense Volunteers. The group is funded and trained by the government to help contain Islamist insurgents. A 4-year Islamist insurgency in Burkina Faso has killed thousands across Africa's Sahel region and forced more than 1 million people to flee their homes. You're watching Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. Mali denies deployment of Russian mercenaries and says only trainers are present. And Kenya to begin offering COVID-19 booster shots. Mali's government has denied the presence of Russian mercenaries in its country. This is after 15 Western powers accused Russia of providing material support to a deployment of private military contractors. In a statement, government spokesman Abdullahi Maiga said only Russian trainers are in the country as part of a bilateral agreement with Moscow. France, Canada and 13 European nations on Thursday alleged that private military contractors from the Russian-backed Wagner Group were in Mali to help battle an Islamist insurgency. Kenya is set to start offering booster shots to individuals 6 months after they received their initial shots. The country's Ministry of Health says people who have been fully vaccinated can receive the same vaccine or a different one as an additional dose. CGTN's Wilkisa Nyabo has more insights on that developing story.
Kenya's decision to offer booster shots comes at a time when the country continues to register more COVID-19 cases. On Christmas Eve, Kenya registered nearly 33% of positive COVID-19 tests from slightly over 9,000 people tested, its highest rate of positive COVID-19 tests yet. The country's COVID-19 vaccine numbers, however, still remain fairly low. By 24th December, Kenya had administered about 9.5 million vaccines. Just 14.4% of adults in the country are fully vaccinated. In early December, the country confirmed the presence of the Omicron coronavirus variant, and with the emergence of the Omicron variant, the country is looking to ramp up its vaccination rates. The Ministry of Health announced that it would demand proof of vaccination to access public spaces such as hotels, restaurants and airports from 21st December. Now it is turning to the booster shots to help tackle the disease. Kenya uses the AstraZeneca, Sinopharm, Moderna, Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson vaccines. Adults who have been fully vaccinated will be offered the same or different vaccine for an additional dose. The Pfizer COVID vaccine will also be offered to children aged 15 and above. The country has set a target of vaccinating at least 30 million people by December 2022. Wilkisa Nyabo, CGTN in Nairobi, Kenya.
Christian faithful in Nigeria are joining their counterparts all over the world to mark the Christmas celebrations. The season is usually marked by religious, social and family gatherings. But like in 2020, this year requires compliance to COVID-19 safety protocols, especially as the Omicron variant of the coronavirus continues to raise global concerns. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam tells us more.
The mood is set for Christmas in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. From the glimmering Christmas decors to the musical renditions of hymns and carols. But behind the glitz and glam is the significance of the celebration.
There's something that comes with the season that speaks of celebration, that speaks of sharing, of giving and of love. But more significantly and more spiritually is the fact that this represents the season that God gave his greatest gift, his son Jesus Christ, to be the savior of mankind from sin.
This is the second year in a row Nigeria is celebrating Christmas amid the coronavirus pandemic. Its fourth wave has got health authorities calling for strict restrictions and adherence to safety protocols.
Going out, we should we'll always be cautious of the places we go. If we are going to amusement parks, we'll try as much as possible to avoid where there are overcrowding. So for me, that's just basically what we intend to do with my family.
I hope to have fun. Take my kids out, take my family out, hang out with friends, hang out with family. You know, last year with the COVID coming in, we had to be locked down. We didn't have to have the opportunity to celebrate with family, with friends and all of that. For the fact that we have to celebrate this year doesn't mean that we have to be carefree.
Religious organizations too are championing the adherence to safety measures.
As a church, especially with this fourth wave, we've been stricter. We're stricter in the announcement, up to like pointing a few people out who did not wear their masks. So where we've noticed a little slack in people's attitude towards that, we've trumped up our insistence on people wearing the mask.
Despite all odds, many will stop at nothing to take advantage of the season, showing love and making merry. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Ethiopia has renewed calls for the return of the famous Magdala collection. The treasures are currently being kept by several British institutions and collectors. The collection includes various objects from an Ethiopian town previously known as Magdala. Among them are items from Emperor Tewodros II, as well as altar tablets considered sacred within the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition. The Ethiopian embassy in London purchased back a Bible and shield from private collectors earlier this year.
Some of them ended up in museums and others ended up in private collections of the soldiers. And the soldiers also, when they found Theodore's body, they cut bits of his hair, ripped bits of his shirt, and as souvenirs.
Disappointing not because that particular family auctioned them, but because these are part of Ethiopian treasures, which auctioned in the outside world.
Well, let's now take a look at your business news. Here's what's ahead. Tunisia's Tunisair acquires 5 new aircraft for $261 million. And South Africa's paddlers use influence to resolve water-related issues.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's begin in Tunisia, where the state-owned carrier has bought 5 new aircraft at a total cost of around $261 million. The first of the 5 planes was delivered on Thursday. 3 more will be delivered in April, July and September next year, while the 5th aircraft will be delivered in April 2023.
The first aircraft was delivered on Thursday. The Minister of Transport declared that the reinforcement of Tunisair's fleet with 5 new planes will help solve the problems of delays and to respect flight schedules.
This new aircraft is the first delivered of the 5 purchased by Tunisair. These aircrafts will guarantee comfort, safety and security. Tunisair is embarking on a process to revamp its fleet among a reform plan that includes fleet renewal. This is the first step in the restructuring plan.
The national carrier is working to optimize its network. The 5 Airbus A320neo will save Tunisair's fuel and reduce CO2 emissions.
This new aircraft will save fuel by 15 to 20%. It will allow Tunisia to go further and reach new destinations. The operation distance will reach 5,700 kilometers from Tunis Carthage Airport and open new markets for the airliner. The Airbus A320neo will also reduce CO2 emissions by 20%.
The CEO of the Tunisian airline added that the company's restructuring plan has started. In addition, the national carrier plans a capital increase. The company will also reduce expenditure and cancel unprofitable flights.
Tunisair is implementing the reform and development program by reducing the wage bill and limiting expenses. We are also negotiating early retirement plans with syndicates and social partners. The airliner needs to be competitive because we will sign the Open Skies agreement as soon as possible.
Tunisair plans to raise the load factor of its new planes by increasing to 78% the percentage of available seating capacity that will be filled with passengers by 2024. Tunisia aims to carry 1.8 million passengers and increase its turnover to more than $280 million in 2022. The company is continuing with plans to overhaul and modernize its fleet. This program will allow Tunisair to maintain 15 to 17 aircraft in operation. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Soweto's Canoe and Recreational Club has taken on the issue of water shortages in the country by ensuring that they help local communities preserve local dams. The club was formed to cultivate more black paddlers, and it has produced some of the most exciting up-and-coming talent South Africa has seen to date. CGTN's Elisan Jamela has the details.
This is one of the dams that the Soweto Canoe and Recreational Club is helping with the cleanup, the Westdene Dam. The Westdene Dam is part of a series of connected streams flowing through Johannesburg.
Where this waterway is so critical is that it's almost the headwaters of the Braamfontein-Spruit. From Westdene Dam, it goes down through the little dam at UJ, into the Botanical Gardens, through that whole water system, into Emmarentia Dam, and from there it ends up in the Spruit. So if we've got a healthy Westdene Dam, it just helps clean up that entire water system.
The dam was designed to reduce the impact of flood peaks and erosion potential of nearby spruits. It's also a park and a facility that supports plants and animal life. But it's now severely damaged, and if no attention is paid, it will likely simply vanish.
And there's just a huge build-up of rubbish, weed, and everything that needs to remove. And thank goodness we've got committed local residents over here who have helped pull this together with the Soweto Canoe and Recreation Club. And the priority is just to get as much rubbish out of the dam as we possibly can, as much weed, just in order we can get some flow into the water.
With us using water most of the times, so that is a great opportunity for us to be on the other side of cleaning the river that we use, like the dam and the lakes that we use.
Locals have also joined in to assist.
As a community, we came together to do it as one. Because if we're not, somebody's going to do it. We cannot set example. So we came here to set example. Some of things we can be done by talking together and working together as a community.
The organizers of this cleanup campaign say they will ensure that it continues. Yodisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. China sends out a welcoming message to all athletes, sports officials ahead of the Beijing Winter Olympics in February.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player?